This episode is brought to you by novel Til The Bitter endemic. What if there was a happy ending to a pandemic? Perhaps an unexpected love story. After Daisy gets thrust into mandatory quarantine for an infection she can't explain, it's up to her to unravel the truth as to what's behind it and what she can ultimately do to escape it. But she can't do this alone, and that's where she finds not only herself, but a very special person that opens their heart for the betterment of their survival. Find out how in Til The Bitter endemic, coming soon.
Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art and music by giving you guys the first in a three-part series in what we're calling Radiohead's Music Theory Trilogy, focusing on albums in rainbows, The King of Limbs, and A Moon-Shaped Pool. Today, we'll be discussing the first of those three in Rainbows. To hash things out, we're once again joined by our executive, exclusive, senior correspondent, and that is Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham. Welcome back to the show, Buck.
Thank you so much. There's nothing I like more than talking about Radiohead.
It's been a while, too. It's been a minute.
No little smart quips here.
This is a serious show.
This is a serious show. No, we've been talking about this for a while.
This has been in the oven for a while. Yeah. So let's tell the good people why. So I am dubbing this suite of albums, if you will, these three albums, the Music Theory Trilogy, because let's start with let's pull back a little bit, okay? Because the good people listening that may not know, artists love things in threes.
Yes.
Or odd. We love trinities.
Nature things.
Artists, if you think of movie trilogies and all of these things we have always gravitated towards, and they're soothing to us. And music is no different. Oftentimes we have musical acts and bands and performers that create musical compositions, often in times in threes. A trilogy of albums that together there is a cohesive conceptual whole to them. Now, sometimes artists do this on purpose, like they're planned trilogies, like the Berlin trilogy, if you will. They want a series of sounds to be put together that are collectively soothing to the listener, that are a body of work that are meant to be together. Now, there are often times that it is a complete accident. Sometimes it just emerges from the musician's musical output or the artist's just artistic output, whatever it may be. Now, in the case of Radiohead, it's very fascinating because when I started to look at these three albums, I noticed that there was certain things per album that really stood out to me. And that is that In Rainbows was extremely oozing, beautiful, sensual, sexy melody. It was so melodic. It just oozed it from everything, beginning, middle, end. It was so melodic. And I didn't realize, what's crazy, Buck, is I didn't realize quite how melodic it was until The King of Limbs. When The King of Limbs came around, I realized, man, this is so rhythmic. King of Limbs is just like the polar opposite of In Rainbows. And then something happened. A Moon-Shaped Pool came around, and I was like, man, the emphasis is really on harmony here. This is so harmonic. And I realized that I don't think they planned to do this. Knowing Radiohead, they don't like to do the same thing twice. And they often start albums by talking about the things they don't want to do. So, of course, from the last album, they're like, well, we kind of made this really melodic suite of music. Maybe it's time to do the opposite. Let's make it really rhythmic. And that's what they ended up doing. And of course, they did the same thing again with the Moon-Shaped Pool. And I call it the Music Theory Trilogy, officially an NDP audio essay thesis, because if you think of the basic building blocks of music, you have melody, you have rhythm, you have harmony. And though all of the albums, of course, they're still fucking songs. They have parts of all of these things, but the emphasis is so poignant from album to album. And I thought, what a perfect opportunity to do an audio essay on these three amazing albums that really are really tied together in a very beautiful way. And so today we get the honor of starting our 3-part series by talking about In Rainbows. Now, In Rainbows is, Buck, it's a tour de force. It's influential renaissance for not only Radiohead's sound, but direction, and equally the music industry as a whole. They changed the game. And if you've never listened to In Rainbows, guys, for the listener, it's artistically life changing.
Came out at a really interesting time for not only the band or myself, but also the band. Really, they were kind of doing things on their own at this point. They left their long-time contract with EMI,
a record label at the time.
Yeah, they had. I think when I look at In Rainbows and kind of do a hindsight on it, I know that it was a very difficult album for them to make, but it was also kind of like getting back to kind of what they all loved, not just maybe one or two people that kind of drive the bus,
like the managers and the team around them. Of course.
Yes. So this was kind of getting to being back on their own terms and getting kind of back. To me, it was kind of back to what they love to do.
Back to basics. That's why I called it a renaissance.
Yeah.
It's a rebirth.
For me personally, this happened at a really both amazing, tragic, and really tough time in my life. And so this was kind of my soundtrack to that, going through that time.
So is this a dark album to you? I feel like when I talk to a lot of people that also love this album as much as we do, where I hear a series of love songs.
Well, I was going for a breakup at the time.
Yeah, they hear darkness in the music.
I hear a lot of darkness. I actually, and some of them will talk about like the lyrics really kind of hit me for some things that happened in my life at the time. I would say I see some things as dark in it. I would say the kind of the second disc.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. The one that wasn't part of the official release, but kind of the B-sides.
Auxiliary.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that too. I feel like there's no such thing as B-sides with Radiohead, if you really think about it.
They make a ton of music, and exactly. The thing is, it's cool that a lot of the songs they end up eventually releasing in some form, like whether it's an EP or a single. But yeah, it was a cool time. It is, and I want to point out, it is not my favorite Radiohead album. We've already discussed that, but it is like,
so Kid A is still your favorite of
all
time.
Yeah. Kid A. I'd say Kid A, OK Computer, and then In Rainbows.
Like I said, I already hinted at this and kind of stated the fact that I feel that this is Radiohead at some of their most vulnerable and clean and sometimes epic. And I would call this suite of songs, this album, the closest thing to a conceptual series of love songs. I don't know if you feel that way, but to me, these are love songs to me. And like, there is a conceptual album of love songs, that sometimes, much like we hear a lot about the breakup album, right? Mm-hmm. Where this is the love album.
I see some of that. I wouldn't say necessarily love songs totally. I would say the vulnerability part though is huge. I mean, one of the tracks,
I don't want to be your friend. I just want to
be your lover. And that song, when we get to it, I want to talk about it a little bit more because there's a lot of theories of what that means. But yeah, it definitely has that. I would say to me this is like their most vulnerable album, just lyrically. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's not a lot of that like in their lyrics before. It's just I feel a lot of that. I got a lot of that. And maybe it's just kind of my perception of when I listened to it at first. But yeah, there's definitely that element to love songs. There's a lot of like really, you were talking about melodic, and
it's just so melodic.
It's really pretty. Like the whole album.
It's so beautiful. And
it's a beautiful, beautiful album.
We'll talk about that more when we do the album from top to bottom and really hash out the music as a whole and what it means to us and do what we do on our show. But before we can discuss, of course, we all need a little background. It was self-released outside a major label on October 10th, 2007 as a Pay What You Want album. This is the first of its kind for a major release by a major act. And this is why I say they kind of changed the music industry as a whole almost overnight, because this was literally pay what you want. You could have paid nothing. You could just download the album or give them $100 or euros or whatever the fuck it was, pounds. It really, though, they got both critical acclaim and critical, constructive criticism for this act. It really stood the test of time, and it kind of landed them just not only for the music but also for the release, for also their connection with the fans, for all these things around the music too that really changed a lot of what we take for granted. Changed overnight. It is the Luckily, it was followed by a physical release later in the timeline as well. This is their 7th studio album, following Hail to the Thief and preceding, as already talked about, The King of Limbs. It was produced by longtime collaborator Nigel Goodrich, after initial recordings with producer Spike Stent did not go to plan. Of course, album artwork, an additional limited edition artwork, and liner notes were designed by their other longtime collaborator, artist Stanley Donwood. Before we talk music, top to bottom, I want to talk about the history as it pertains to us and probably a lot of people listening. So, Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham, tell me your first impressions, those lingering memories when you were hearing this for the first time.
I remember, shout out to the weblog Green Plastic, because I don't even know if it still exists anymore, but that was kind of where I got a lot of my Radiohead news. And I remember hearing rumblings that this might come out, and then going to download it, and the pay what you want, which was so cool at the time. Like you said, it was groundbreaking. Like, I didn't even know what to do. I felt bad, like not paying enough. I think I remember paying like $8,
like 50% off a normal, probably.
Yeah.
At the time, like a normal,
and you could call me cheap,
retail price.
Yeah, but I had no money at the time.
We were college kids.
We were college kids, but I didn't want to just be like, yeah, I'll just give you $1. But it was really cool, and I remember being just so excited listening to it. And that first track, that 5/4,
I think it has more of a 5/8 feel when I count it out. But
I have
the
read
music
that
theory
it's
is in 5/4.
Yeah.
When you actually write it out, it's 5/4. But to me, how I count it in my head is 5/8.
And folks, remember, we're coming from a time Radiohead hadn't released an album in over 4 years, and the last time it was Hail to the Thief.
Hail to the Thief's so long and a little bloated at times.
Yeah,
and where this was so concise.
Yeah, and
honestly,
I think it's like, right from the start,
and it's like a perfect length.
So I just remember the first playthrough. I remember just like I had it. I downloaded it. I put it on my iPod Nano, and I was walking up the campus, and I remember I literally stopped and sat on one of the one of the benches.
Like it took the wind out of you.
It took the wind out of me. I had to stop
sit down to listen to this.
I had to replay.
Stood still.
I remember I didn't even go to the next song. I replayed 15 Step all over again, and it was kind of one of those things when you listen to an album that you love for the first time. There's like that magical feeling, almost like it's Christmas.
Oh, it's magic.
And like, when you're a kid and you're so excited that like you can't wait till the next thing, and you get so excited, like you want to call everybody and you want to tell them about it, and just you're like gushing. You're almost like you met like this. You went on a date with this lovely woman, and you just have like this exciting feeling.
It's like I'm gonna marry her one day.
Oh yeah, it's like the your love blind like kind of thing, butterflies in your stomach. I know it's for an album, but that's just it. I immediately fell in love with it.
See, you're using the L word again. I'm gonna die on this fucking hill. This is an album of love songs. Now I have actually a confession for you that I don't even think you know this. So I did not get into this album until a few years later, to be honest. And I listened to it so much that I don't have that experience at all. I don't remember the first time I listened to it. All I remember is in terms of those initial memories of the album when I was falling in love with it, I remember not being able to stop listening to it. I remember like right after Videotape, when it would just loop back to 15th Step, I was like, God, I got to listen to this again and again and again. And I probably listened to this album once I really got into it. I probably listened to it for months in magnitude, probably off and on for a full year straight. Definitely sometimes it's all I would listen to for months at a time. Like there was nothing else that would take it off its perch. And something happened to me. And that is, and this is the confession, is I always liked Radiohead, for the record, but I wasn't a super fan like you. I wasn't in love with Radiohead until In Rainbows. And it is my favorite album of Radiohead still to this day of all time. I actually have that album artwork framed in my home just to put it in perspective.
Yeah, you made me when
yes.
an art piece.
Tell the good people. Yeah, I tell the good people in your own words, and then I'll kind of give my own.
Well, when you're a young man and you venture clear across the country, away from all your friends, and you're kind of on your little island, and you one of your dearest and bestest friends calls you and says, I made something for you. Shipped it to my work at the time. Didn't know what to expect, but he's got if you know anything about Radiohead, they have the Radiohead bear.
It's their kind of unofficial logo.
Their unofficial logo. Probably going to be, whenever I decide to do it, my first hat I ever get. But I can't remember what technique you used, but it was
stencil. I made a stencil of the logo head, of the bear head.
Yeah, and it still to this day hangs up in my house.
I actually have my version.
Yeah, you have yours.
I have mine
in your
framed
office.
in my office. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was there a couple months ago.
So describe kind of what it is, what it looks like. So I made just to set him up. I feel like I'm on a talk show, like setting up a trailer, just to set up the trailer.
Set it up.
Buck.
Yeah.
I love this album so much. I wanted to make an art piece dedicated, like an ode to In Rainbows.
Yes.
Like something you could not buy in a store. And I made four and only four versions of the piece. And I kept the first one, and then I gave it to my closest musical collaborators in my life that have helped me shape who I am as a person and as an artist.
It's like the Radiohead bear cut out.
It's like all the negative space is the bear head.
Yes.
And underneath it is a canvas, but
white canvas.
I did something special with the canvas.
Yeah, you put, and I'm from the Midwest, so do not cringe when I pronounce it this way. Crowns.
Crayons.
Crayons. We call it crowns where I'm from. You put it in a rainbow pattern, and then you melted them down, so it's got like the rainbow pattern where that negative space is. Now you can see that where the bear logo is. So it's very cool.
I was really happy with that piece.
Yeah.
And I gave it one to my brother, Kobar Spiritual, to Buck, and one to my longtime music writing partner, Joe. Shout out to Joe if you're listening, big guy. And that was so long story short, that is when I became a super fan, is because of In Rainbows. And then I went back, and then I started over. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'm listening to Pablo Honey. I'm digging deeper. I'm like, okay, now I am a super fan. I'm in love with this album. I want to see why the rest of the world, the rest of the deep divers are in love with their back catalog. And so I went back, and of course, I fell in love with a lot of their back catalog. OK Computer is probably a close second. Kid A, of course, is up there. But In Rainbows always will be the one that always will hold a special, special place in my heart. And with that being said, let's talk music. We start the album with what Buck has already talked about with 15th Step, and we already talked about time signatures a little bit. So we're going to talk a little music theory in our music theory trilogy. And yes, it starts with an odd time signature. And I actually don't want to talk about just the music theory in terms of that. We're not going to count out fucking beats for you guys. What I want to talk about the fact is that their use of time signatures is so deceptive that it sounds like common time to the lay listener. listener, you don't realize it's odd time because it sounds so comfortable. How they phrase the notes and where they put the notes, it's so comfortable and sounds like common time. And I've actually, me and Buck have seen them live a couple of times. And what's great is like when they play this, they'll sometimes try to include the audience and have them clap to the rhythm of the signature, and no one can fucking get it because subconsciously they know it's off. You know, it's not common time. So when they try to keep up with the band, no one can really do it, and they just fucking give up. They just play the song and no one claps to the rhythm of the music. And it's kind of, I think me and Buck like looked at each other and, you know, we just had a smirk on our face of like, we know why you're having a hard time keeping up with that, guys.
They so want to be like the front man and have like the whole like audience do like probably to what they grew up, you know, going to concerts.
Yeah, they want a little audience participation, but they fucking couldn't do it.
It's not that kind of thing. I'm sorry.
And this is, you know, Buck has talked about this a lot when we talk Radiohead, and that is that Colin Greenwood approaches his bass lines like a traditional guitar player would write guitar melodies. And that's every time, like, this is that album, you know, in hindsight, you know, when I got into The King Limbs and I got into A Moonshaped Pool and I realized, man, this is so melodic compared to those albums. I will even hum the bass line to 15 Step, that do 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 do.
Yeah.
And then of course the da, 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 da. I'm constantly humming this album, and that says something to the melodies they wrote.
Well, and I think, you know, and hardcore Radiohead fans might disagree with me. I really think this trilogy of albums, I don't know if for me, really opened my eyes on how good of a bassist Colin is.
Oh, he's so good. He's the secret weapon. I've always called him the secret weapon.
And especially when I can just hear because I played it so many times, this bass line myself. I'm thinking through it. It's like you said, I think that's a good point. He's really playing it like a guitar, like another melody, and it's so good. And when this song starts, you don't know where it's going because it's using a drum track.
Right, it's using a drum machine track.
And then
that Selway comes in with his actual drums.
Yeah,
right.
When I first heard it, I go, oh, okay, we're going back to kind of our old, like we're sticking with electronic.
Kind of Kid A. Yeah,
we're still on that path. And it's almost like they immediately did that to deceive you a little bit.
The whole album is like that. We get the rug is pulled out from under us all of the time.
And the one thing I will say about this whole album itself is each song almost feels like there's a transition in it that almost changes the whole mood a little bit, or like will kind of give you this ethereal feeling and sense, and then maybe we'll just kind of like almost like you're dreaming, having this out of body experience, and then it pulls you right back in. This is kind of that song, especially in the middle of it. It's just so interesting. I just remember just listening to this at first, and why I said I had to stop and re-listen to it is because I immediately had that same feeling. Like it's, oh, okay, this is the same thing. Kind of hearing continuation of their sound, and then it was almost like they took a step back a little bit and said, haha, no, we're still riffing guitars.
We still want to rock.
We still want to thrash guitars, you know.
And oh my God, talk about even punk rock sometimes. Yeah. And that is when I hear still to this day the guitar figure in the second track, Body Snatchers, I feel like there's a grit to it. There's a punk rock essence to it. And the song itself does another, let's pull the rug out from under them, because when we get to the bridge, it turns into this beautiful, I'm not sure if he's like doing a little music theory again. I'm not sure if he's doing like a 30-second kind of quick set of notes to create that middle, very beautiful bridge of guitar lines, or if he's doing like a steel guitar slide type of effect, or some sort of effect that they mix together to create that very beautiful line right in the middle before they go back into the main guitar figure to end the piece. But it's because there's so much grit and rough, raw power to the beginning of the piece. When we get to that crescendo in the middle, it really, the word that is popping into my head right now, it shines. The music really shines.
It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. There's almost like especially this song, it felt like we were going back to like 90, 96, 97 Radiohead.
Right.
But then, like you said, it pulls the rug from out, and almost every song almost on this album, except a few, have this transition in the bridge, or totally change kind of, and we'll get to it here in a second, just have this amazing transition in their song that, like I said, you're grounded, and then you kind of go into this kind of ethereal, kind of dreamlike almost realm, and then it pulls you right back in. And that's kind of how I feel throughout this whole album. Is it keeps you grounded, then it lets you float a little bit, but it brings you right back down, but like in a good way.
In an absolute good way. And we float again on Nude on track number 3.
This album, or this track.
Nude. Okay, so Nude is here's another way I look at the album that, and this is the first time I felt like I know other albums do this, but I felt like there's something about In Rainbows that just encapsulate this set of dualisms we hear in music a lot. And that's with the emotion of what I call beautiful sadness or sad beauty, where the song is very beautiful. The song is very beautiful, but there's a sadness in that beauty. Yeah. Or you can look at it the opposite way. And I think a lot of people look at beauty and sadness as opposites, but I think they're complementary, because when you see people at weddings and they're crying, they're just bawling, and you're like, oh my God, are you okay? And they say something like, I'm just so happy. Beauty can make you feel sad in a strange way. And I feel like this whole album made me feel that way time and time again.
Yeah, that's why when originally said this album and this track, you mentioned a lot of love songs on this album. To me, it's more, I lean towards it's the kind of the darker tone of the album itself, and I said vulnerability, and I think this is the most vulnerable song on here. And Nude, for one thing, when you're nude, you're very vulnerable. You're very vulnerable. And for me at this time, like I said, this was kind of a tough time in my life. It was a great time and a tough time. It's one of those that you love, but you kind of get a little bit of that sadness of that feeling of that time, and sometimes that's okay to feel, though. It's also, like you said, going back, it's one of the prettiest songs I think they've ever written.
The melody mirrors that too.
Yeah,
like it's sad, it's beautifully sad, or sad beauty, and what you're describing, we hear that in the string arrangements and the vocal melodies and the harmonies of those together. So again, there's still rhythm and harmony here, but sometimes I will hum Nude to myself, and there is a hauntingness to it. And the next track on our list, Weird Fishes Arpeggi, is another, between Nude or this track, Weird Fishes, if you need to bring someone in just with the start of a track, not even here's the whole album, listen to it, I would invite them to listen to Weird Fishes or Reckoner or Jigsaw Falling Into Place. This is the kind of track that it is, and it's also the epitome of melody. I believe, I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, you X, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube commenters that shit on us about not knowing every minute detail. I want to say that there's 3 interlocking guitar figures here. That's how I hear it. But they fit together to say that's perfect is like an understatement. I know there's nothing better than perfect, 100%, but there's something about these figures together, these interlocking guitar figures, that is just hypnotizing.
You know how much I love this song too.
I'm pretty sure it's Kobar Spiritual's favorite. I think
on this album,
maybe definitely on this album, but maybe of all time. Just like Nude is your favorite, I would say Weird Fish is my brother's favorite.
Yeah, I would say this is probably my second on this. I think I'm pretty sure he and I've had this conversation. But
we have this a lot off air for sure.
Yeah. This, and it's hard, and I keep waffling back. It's hard to choose a favorite on this.
They all really do go together as a whole. It is an album, a collection of pieces that work so well together. It is a suite of a musical body.
Yeah, and what's kind of cool about this song too, just to kind of give a little background, this was a TikTok song for a lot of last year, for a lot of videos, and it got a lot of the Zoomers into Radiohead. Which was, I always thought was kind of weird, but the album kind of had a resurgence in the last year because of all this. So it's kind of cool. But this song in particular, it is a journey musically. And again, it's one of those, the transition that happens in this. It is so beautiful and ethereal. So beautiful. And then the song starts amazingly, and you talk about this, you do feel like you're floating in the ocean and sinking to the bottom, and the lyrics are just wonderful, just kind of, for me, trying to decide on whether to take a risk or not, and having all the background things in your life, in your thoughts, kind of bother you, but then kind of just accepting your fate. And that's what I've always, what I've always loved about this song. And then that transition, my God, just
Perfect.
the coolest.
Yeah.
So cool. This is another one I had to stop and re-listen to. And I think I just kept replaying this song over and over and over again.
It's easily, I think, probably top 5, top 10 for
Definitely
most people. Like probably people listening. And when you were talking about the TikTok thing and the resurgence, it's like it made me think that Radiohead has always had a fascinating like history with time. Because a lot of their music either sits in their head for a long time. Like before we get too far away from Nude was a song they wrote from the OK Computer days.
Yep.
And they rearranged it and changed it a bit, and it became a completely different beast. A part of it is under the supervision of Nigel Goodrich, their producer. I think really helped shape it to the thing we know it as today.
Yeah,
but,
Nigel's great.
Yeah, he's
such a talented
the 6th
producer.
member in a lot of ways,
and not just for Radiohead.
Like Martin.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great comparison. He is definitely like George Martin, and funny connection there too. He even produced a Paul McCartney album, so
he's got his fingerprints
on.
His DNA is on a little of everything in the music industry and the biz.
That layers of sound that he kind of created, especially when you get to Kid A. Like we've talked about in the past, like people have written master's theses.
Oh my God, yes.
It's really incredible. This album, again, it's just a lot of. I don't know how much it would be without him.
He's all I need.
Sometimes. Yeah, there you go. And that's nothing to diminish the talent of these guys. I'm just thinking.
Oh no, it's a team effort. It's a cohesive vision that they're bringing, that they're fulfilling, and that brings us to track number 5, All I Need. And this is another. I mean, I've said it time and time again. I'll keep saying it. This is the kind of vocal melody you're going to hum until the end of fucking time.
Another like transition at the end of the song where it goes like into the little xylophone.
Yeah, a lot of the instrumentation is deceptive. I feel like when people hear this, definitely compared to Kid A, Amnesiac, Hail to the Thief, where a lot of the strange instrumentation is at the foreground, I feel like this is really mixed into the background just to add that extra layer of texture and spice and everything nice, where it doesn't have to take the foreground, doesn't have to take the spotlight.
Interesting. We haven't talked too much about it, but like the background, how they recorded a lot of this, and a lot of this you can see too when they're playing live. One thing is there's a lot of live videos. There's one, and I'm not going to say it because I'm worried I might be spoiling something, but there's definitely watching them play this live, especially like all these songs, is pretty amazing. It's part of the fun when you go watch Radiohead live
because they rearrange all of their own pieces for live renditions.
Yeah. And you're like, one, you're trying to figure out how they did this in the studio, but two, how are they
doing it live?
Yeah. So it's really cool. And this is another one. I think Johnny said in this one he wanted to capture the sensation of white noise generated by a band playing loudly in a room when all this chaos kicks up. I mean, and you kind of think of towards the end of this song. Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that they think that way. They're putting, like, when you listen to these songs, they seem very, straightforward, simple compared to their other work. Like I was talking about the foreground, background type of musical elements and the mixing involved. Yeah, I think on the surface, so again, it's deceptive. I feel like that's a subthesis for this entire piece, is that in Rainbows it's deceptive. That it seems like a very straightforward, just very simple song, and there's just so much going on in the background that just like when you actually study it and read the interviews on how they crafted the music and all of the sessions, it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, like they put all of that into it. I didn't hear that, but man, that just like creates a whole nother level to the album. That brings us to track number 6, Faust Arp. This is, I don't have a ton to say about this. I've always liked this song. It is short and sweet. It's very short, very sweet, very to the point. And to me, it's like, it clocks in at 2 minutes, 10 seconds. And to me, it's like almost like the bridge to the rest of the album.
And I tell you what, I'm a sucker for strings. So you put that.
God. The strings and that falsetto vocal and the harmonies that are created there are priceless. Some of the best, I think, in music history ever on this album.
Yeah, again, simple song, just acoustic guitar at the beginning, and then the strings just come right into it. Again, another transition towards the end of the song just kind of moves into this beautiful string melody, and man, like a little over 2 minutes. So pretty short.
2 minutes 10 seconds.
But yeah, like you said, it's almost a little bit of a rest.
Yeah, it's a little bridge, and that is, I think, again, purposeful, because then we get to my favorite song on the whole album is Reckoner. I would actually say this is top 3, no particular order, favorite song of their entire discography. It usually changes from How to Disappear Completely to Reckoner to Paranoid Android. Some, depending on what mood I am, those will take top dog spot. But those, Reckoner is definitely my top. I would say top 3. Their entire catalog, literally everything they've ever written.
It's another beautiful song. I believe Reckoner is the only time in the entire album where the album title is in the lyrics.
Yeah, In Rainbows is in the lyrics.
Yeah.
And this is, to your point about Nude, where you like really, the lyrics really meant something to you and you really studied them. I feel like for Reckoner, to me, it's the complete opposite, where I have read the lyrics before, but I often forget them, because to me, this is a perfect example of it doesn't matter. I don't need to understand or know or actually hear the actual words he's saying, because when you hear that vocal melody going over all of that percussion, just this beautiful foundation they created with all these different instruments, I'm transported. Remember, this is when Nova gets a little hippy dippy. When the when the universe stands still, when the stars align. We've talked about this with other music, and Reckoner is one of those pieces for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like I said, this was one of the albums, not that I didn't before, but like really focused on the lyrics, and this one feels a lot like a lot of these. It feels like poetry. I don't know, for some reason when I listened to this first time, because we separate, like Ripples on a Blank Shore really hit me hard.
But how he sings it too, like he really elongates those words.
Oh my god,
makes those notes so big and long and tight.
It's so pretty.
Like him just singing the words separate is like this really long piece of music with the notes he attaches to it.
Talked about how he uses his voice, and I wouldn't say he's the greatest singer of all time or anything like that, but he definitely uses it's exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's another instrument. So by using that, like how he says separate, which I agree. Oh man, I was thinking about this. We were at a sorry, T-Buck Tangent Corner.
Well, we need one every show.
We were at a brewery. We were at a brewery not too long ago, and the song came on, and
I love it when it comes on in the wild when you're out somewhere.
Oh yeah,
you're like, is that fucking Reckoner? Yeah,
and I said, "Oh, I love this song," and the person behind the bar said, "This album is my favorite album of all time." I looked at her and I go, "This is my favorite band of all time." And the person with me said, "I've never heard this song in my life."
Yeah.
And we listened to the whole thing, and now that person is telling me they're totally blown away by this band, and they had no idea about it. So yeah, like you said, it's in the wild, and you hear this because it is a unique song.
It is, but it isn't. Like, you listen to it enough times and you're like, in a weird way, I feel like this is one of the most simple songs they wrote for these sessions.
It is, but I think with time, though, we maybe have not. It maybe sounds okay. This could be a debate, but I think
I don't know. We'll have to do it in after hours. I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, maybe with time it seems more normal. I feel like at the time this still was when it came out, was pretty groundbreaking, though.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Can we talk about the cover of this that you actually talked?
The Gnarls Barkley
you introduced
cover.
Me to. Yeah.
I've seen that cover live, actually.
No way! You didn't? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I saw Gnarls Barkley live one time, and they started playing it, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
This was an early YouTube video you told me about. I remember you texting me or calling me, and
he has the register. He has the vocal range to really, because CeeLo, he can really hit those
high
falsetto notes.
Yeah.
That Tom can. Those are hard. That's hard to sing. That's hard to do. I try to sing. For example, I'm in the shower. Novo's in the shower singing, trying to sing everything in its right place. That is so fucking hard to sing. Like, so many of these songs are so hard to sing.
No, I
completely crack. I'll go flat or sharp. I can't hit the notes he's hitting. So I have to do it in a deeper, like a tenor register.
I can't even attempt it, so I don't. don't. I thought you were going to, when you're talking about everything in the right place, you're like going to go into like a Vanilla Sky reference.
No, no.
I remember hearing that in that movie and being like, oh, this is awesome. And then the movie was okay. But great song.
Great song. Cannot recommend it enough. I feel that way. It feeds really well into track number 8, House of Cards. I don't want to be your friend. I just want to be your lover. So let's take that pin out. This is, I feel like this has to be like Nude for you, where like when you read the lyrics and it gets a hold of you, these lyrics and the message, it had to, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, it spoke to you much like Nude did.
100%. And again, it was the time, again, I was going through a breakup. I was also talking, somebody that was kind of helping me through a breakup was also kind of going through their own. Her and I were kind of like flirting with the idea, doing something. So like that was with House of Cards that really hit me, because it's kind of how I see it as, it's a song where you're trying to think of, you're trying to say,
forget about your House of Cards and I'll do mine.
Forget about it. Let's just try it. I don't want to be your friend. I just want to be your lover, kind of thing. So yeah, I felt like that was that weird point in my life where it really hit me hard at the time, because it felt like I was going through something similar.
And that brings us to track number 9, Jigsaw Falling Into Place. I'll start the conversation with this one statement. I think this guitar line will go down in history as one of the greatest of all time.
The one that Johnny does, like right in the middle of it?
Well, I mean the main figure, throughout the main, kind of the centerpiece figure that starts the piece too. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good example of a conversation for, I think even the guitar figures and lines sound simple, but then you actually like see like tutorials of like how to play these things. And I'm like, fuck, this is hard. These are hard to play.
I'm listening to it now. And from that comment and trying to think of it, and it is, but again, there's like so many layers between the different guitar riffs going on between the 3 guitarists in this. It's so complex.
Yeah, it's much more complex than we realize. And it's another one. This is their first single. I could see why they wanted to, give the world this one to start with. I feel like if I was in the room, if I was the manager, I'd be like, guys, what about Weird Fishes as the first single? Jigsaw Falling Into Place. And they would have been like, oh, know about that. But we like Jigsaw Falling Into Place more. So we would put that out as a single, give it to radio stations.
Radio station.
And that brings us to track number 10, Videotape.
Haunting.
Radiohead has always had an interesting relationship with the tracks that they choose to end their albums.
Yeah.
And this is another deceptive rhythm, because it does not start on, the way you count it is you have to count it on the and beats and not on the actual down beats.
Yeah, what is the time
notes.
signature of this?
The signature is common time.
It is common time.
It's common time, but all of the accents are on the and beats. So if you count like eighth notes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all of the accents are, the rhythm begins on the and, not on the 1. So that's why they have, if you ever see them playing this live, he'll mess up. He'll do false starts a lot. He has a hard time performing this live, because he's hearing the rhythm in his head and he's trying to match the chords to the rhythm of his head, and he wants to keep starting on the 1 instead of the and.
When we saw them one of the times, wasn't there a time where was it this song where he actually
No,
stopped?
it was Identikit. Messed up. So they were working on Identikit before A Moon-Shaped Pool was ever even released. This was during their King of Limbs tours, when me and Buck saw them last together, that is. And they were playing a different version too. Remember, they have a fascinating relationship with their songs, and when it comes to time, and they'll road test stuff. They'll play it before it's like fully finished in the studio or the studio version. And it was Identikit. They messed up on Identikit, and they made a joke about it, and then they restarted it and finished it. And that was before A Moon-Shaped Pool was even a twinkle in their eye. They were writing Identikit. Yeah, that was. I think I like moments like that, for the record, because sometimes the music is so good it doesn't feel real. It's like someone just like hit a button and this is the recording of it, and that's what we're hearing live. And then when they mess up, they're like, oh no, they're really playing this live. You know, it just kind of makes it real.
Yeah.
I always like those moments. It's videotape is a weird mishmash of ideas that shouldn't work but does somehow. I'm looking at you, Idiotech. But that's always been a Radiohead staple, right? Like, it's so many of these kind of musical ideas that, God, on paper, like when they were like writing this out, when they were, especially when all of like the drum machine drums come in at the end, and they're putting things in really weird spots. And it's clearly Tom wrote it on just like he was on a piano, and he was singing over these chords. And then when the rest of the band came in to really flesh it out into a fully realized composition, it just takes you to a different fucking planet.
It really does. And it was interesting you were saying like the relationship this band has with the last tracks on their albums, and I was trying to think of like
motion picture soundtrack.
Yeah, it's The Tourist.
The Tourist. They're always kind of slow, like they're always kind of like videotape. And there's that through line, that DNA. We talk about this too, where there's a lot of their music you could find on different albums. This like, oh, this could have. I made a joke about Idiotech. I mean, I feel like videotape could have ended up on Kid A or an Amnesiac, and it just ended up here. And what I love about videotape is that really makes you want to start the whole album over again. So as soon as that ends, and as soon as you hear that rhythm on 15th Step come in, to restart the album, that's part of the reason I couldn't stop listening to it, because it's so cyclical, beautiful feedback loop that I don't think was intended. I don't think they literally designed it that way. It just kind of accidentally happened, musically and sonically. And I think we're all forever changed for it, by it. Now, we can't get out of here without talking about Disc 2. Now, let's take that pin out, because you said the cardinal sin of Radiohead words is B-side. So yes, this often gets the dubious title of B-sides. Here's the thing about Radiohead, from what I've learned and studied and seen in interviews, is when they think of albums, again, they think of it as an artistic expression, a cohesive whole, and sometimes certain tracks just don't fit onto the album, the body of the album, even though they really love it and they have it fully fleshed out, fully written, fully mixed, fully mastered. Like it's ready to be released, but they actually put it, they'll probably listen to it themselves into the context of the other songs around it, and they're like, it's not working. I think the most famous example of this ever is Pyramid Song was written during the initial Kid A sessions, and they loved that song so much, but they're like, it just doesn't fit Kid A as a body of work, and that's why it was released with Amnesiac. And we see a lot of just to go through the list real quick, so we'll call it a bonus set of music, not B-sides or auxiliary songs, because I will say this, I always try to correct myself, because sometimes I accidentally call them B-sides too. I correct myself because some of the best guys, if you're getting into Radiohead, some of their best music are on these kind of albums.
Absolutely.
They're on these EPs. Like, for some reason, it just doesn't fit. These are my twisted words, whatever.
Polyethylene.
Yeah, there's so many great Radiohead tracks that just never quite fit on their studio albums.
Spectre.
They released them. So, oh my God, Spectre, yes. Staircase. I mean, like, there's so many great tracks. There's so many hidden gems, and we're going to talk about that more in the outro, that we encourage you so much. Do your own digging. But just to go from top to bottom real quick, we're not going to talk about all of them like we talked about the LP proper, but real quick, track number 1 is MK1. Track number 2 is Down is the New Up. 3 is Go Slowly. I will say this is one of the very few aux songs that I feel like could have really been in the actual album.
Yeah.
Go Slowly is hauntingly beautiful.
Beautiful.
God. Track 4 is MK2. Track 5 is Last Flowers. Track
Haunting.
6, another haunting one. Track 6 is Up on the Ladder. Track 7 is Bangers and Mash, and track number 8 is 4-Minute Warning. Yeah, MK1 and MK2 is kind of like I'm calling them the skeletal remains of other ideas. Like MK1 is definitely the deep cut aspects of videotape. When you can actually hear the melody in videotape. MK2 is just a series of ideas. Whereas like Down is the New Up is a song proper, Go Slowly is a song proper, Last Flowers, Up on the Ladder, Bangers and Mash, 4-Minute Warning.
It's Last Flowers that was like one that really gut punched me. Yeah, and it was interesting. The first time I heard it was actually in the car. I was listening to our college radio station, and they were playing it. And I go, I haven't heard this song. And I had to go look it up immediately, and they said, oh yeah, there's a disc 2 that's coming out. And I don't even know how they got it. I think it might have been from one of their live stuff, because now I'm thinking about it. But yeah, oh my God, such a sad song, but like impactful. I love it. I actually love several songs on this album. Looking at my Spotify right now, I have 2, 4, 5 songs I like on this out of 8.
With that being said, let's tie a bow on this beautiful bee and tell the good people why. Why is this may be a hard conclusion because In Rainbows is the fucking album. Like why is it so powerful, earth shattering, life changing? It's just one of those that will go down as one of the greatest of all time.
So Radiohead like kind of became something different in the early 2000s, in my opinion. They started being compared to like Pink Floyd, Bowie,
Beatles, yeah.
And I think there was kind of this era around them that they were becoming something more than anything. You weren't sure what the next path they would take would be. And I think this album not only surprised a lot of people, but it was a lot more accessible maybe than what their other work had been, but still again hugely influential and impactful. You talk to a lot of people when you talk about Radiohead and they like Radiohead, this is their favorite album, like you. But I haven't heard that just from you. I've heard that from a lot of people. Like if they've really dived into their work, or for some people, this was their first really introduction to true Radiohead. Like after, and I'm not trying to say that Pablo Honey wasn't, but Pablo Honey was definitely a different time and a different point in that band's history, and they had a different total kind of outlook on things. Creep will always be the most popular song they ever had because it got the most radio play. But this is for an album that didn't really like none of their songs made the top 10 or anything charts, but like incredibly popular. This is one that you always see on a lot of lists. It's hard to say why it's so important. I just think it's basically, I think, especially in their late career, this was their first adult album. And I think that's what it was important because it really took a lot of things that were going on in their life and it brought it to light. And growing up and getting older, it's definitely something that kind of bridges that gap between those two eras.
Well, there you have it, folks. In Rainbows from top to bottom. And the first in what we're calling our 3-part series, Radiohead's Music Theory Trilogy. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank my guest, of course, Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham. But before we go, we got a little extra for you, a little icing on the cake, a little cherry on top with what we call the Gem of the Week. With this being Radiohead month, we decided to give you some gems that are Radiohead specific. And I'm going to start with mine so we can pass it back to the guest. And that is, I mentioned it a minute ago, Go Slowly. Now, Go Slowly, here's the deep cut. Here's the gem. Go Slowly on disc 2 is excellent, but there is a version that you can listen to, I think only on YouTube right now. But Go Slowly live from the basement, I think is extra special because they rearranged it. Again, we talked about this. They rearranged it just slightly differently for their live rendition, and there was a little bit of different mixing and mastering involved for this version of the song that just elevates it to a brand new level. So guys, check out Go Slowly live from the basement.
I will definitely. I need to reapproach that one. That's a good one. I'm going to go. This is kind of funny, but there was a few different options I had in this, and again, I kind of when I'm talking about these, I'm going to focus on covers and unreleased tracks. But if you search, this is a really early period in Radiohead, but you know that they've always had an interest in James Bond and
hence Spectre.
Well, they made that. Yeah, if famously they've tried to do this twice for 2 James Bond films, but they were hired for Spectre. Spectre
to write the theme.
They wrote an amazing song, and the producers thought it was too depressing, and then they chose a really depressing Sam Smith song.
Well, in their defense, let's be honest, it would not have fit the movie.
I think it would have.
I don't know what. After I saw the movie, I was like, it's probably. It's an amazing song on its own, though. It's one of my favorites.
It's an amazing song. It's a great song for a mediocre movie. Let's just put it that way. It's too good for it. Anyway, if you search their early live shows, Radiohead does a cover of Carly Simon's "Nobody Does It Better." I think Tom York has said he's thought it's one of the sexiest songs ever written. It's one of his favorite songs. They really like Bond theme. So definitely go check that out. It's a fun one.
Guys, if you like that, don't forget to check our stuff out at NovoDayProductions.com. You can, of course, always follow us at _Novo_Day at Days D and at Novo Day Media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review, do all the things. And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child or be on the show, you can reach out to us at novodaymedia@gmail.com or novodayproductions@gmail.com. So until next time, guys, we'll see you in the next one where we're doing part 2 with the King of Limbs. So until then, as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media, at Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACOMusic123. ACO on Spotify. Logo design by Tom Justice, JESTUS, of thejusticecompany.com, and executively produced by Clayton Anderson. All rights reserved.